In this lesson, we're going to learn how to correctly model the floor slabs from our CAD plans. Now, at the end of the last lesson, we had modeled up a fair amount of the ground floor walls, and I had gone and carried on with that process off screen just to basically fill up some of the other empty gaps that had needed modeling. So all of that is in place, and we're basically ready to start modeling the floor slabs. And I like to get the floor slabs out of the way and in place before I go and do anything like doors, windows, or upper levels of any sort. So the first thing that I want to just point out, and it is something that I quite often had confusion with when I started, so I'm assuming that you may have the same questions, is I didn't really know where to place my floor slab. In some instances, I tried to place the floor slab underneath the edge of the wall, which means that I would use the outer edge of the wall as the edge of my floor slab. The problem arises when you use this method is that you essentially will start to see the edge of those floor slabs when you start modeling it and when you see it from the outside perspective. So let's say in this case that I'm going to extrude this downwards by, let's say, 0.2 meters, and let's say that this is now going to be my floor slab. I'm going to change the color so we can see, and I basically tried to do this method. It works fine when you're working on interiors because you basically get this nice and cleanly done, and you have a very simple object. But once you start working with exteriors, especially if you start applying different floor textures to your floor slab as you would to your walls, which you very often do, you then start to see these edges. And this is especially important when you do multi-high-rise buildings. You don't want to see those edges of the floor slabs on the outside of your walls. So this is definitely something that you should not do. So the next thing then, since we now have concluded that we should be drawing the floor slabs on the inside of the walls, that means that when there is a door in place, we need to actually zigzag out and basically cover that area and then continue with that outline. The next question you need to ask yourself is, what height am I going to be modeling my floor slabs at? Now, it's a very good idea to try and keep the same height system in your 3D model as you have in your CAD plans. So let's go and turn on the ground floor grids and heights, and this is going to include these little squares that have our finished floor level heights. So the main finished floor level in our kitchen and dining area is going to be 2.45 meters. So coincidentally, or at least intentionally, that is the same height. If I just select this vertex here, we can see that that is 2.45 meters. And this is quite essential that you are modeling in terms of your Z or Z height in the same figure as your CAD plans. So in other words, your CAD drawings would translate very directly into your 3D model. So as we had already gone and modeled the contours, the same rule applies. Where you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meters on your contours, make sure that those same heights are represented in 3D. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. Now let's say you have a situation where you are using a very high number. For example, you have 125.45. So what you could do there to simplify things is you could just subtract 100 from absolutely all of your numbers. So it would be a global subtraction, because you don't necessarily want to model in your model space way up here, because it's going to just end up having very odd numbers for you to work with. So those are the two considerations, or the main considerations I would have in place before you start modeling floor slabs. Make sure you know where the edge is going to be, and make sure you know what the height is going to be. Once you have those two things sorted out, you pretty much are good to go. Now, if it is confusing, and I have had this confusion before, it is very often easier to understand heights in floor plans if you just print out your floor plan and try to take a single color and just shade in all the areas that have the same height. So you basically start to get an idea of which floors are actually connected and where you have height differences between your floors. For example, in our garage we have 2.15, here we have 2.45, and here we have 2.0. Then down on the terrace we have 2.4. So all of these heights are slightly different, and it's very important to know before you start modeling what those heights are. So I've spoken enough, so let's go and jump right into the modeling stage. So I'm going to create a new layer. This one's going to be called slabs. We just want to make sure that that is unhidden and ticked. And next you basically want to start drawing out your edges of the slabs. So I'm going to just isolate my floor plan, and pretty much the same path applies as what we have done with the walls. Is I'm going to start here in the kitchen area, and I'm going to just start tracing out the inside of the walls with my snaps turned on, And here you can either go around all the walls, but it's not really that necessary. I'm rather just going to cut right through and basically try to cover a single large slab area, just to cover the areas where you know you will have the same texture. Now you can also go and just do the entire outline and cut it up later, but basically you can choose whether you want to have smaller segments or just do the entire thing all in one go. So here let's just start by outlining this, and I'm just going to basically go around, and let's say at this point we're going to actually do quite a large contour around the entire house. So this of course is or can be time consuming. So I'm just going to try to do it as quickly as possible. And it may be a good idea for me at this point just to pause the video and do the entire outline, and then we're going to have a look at what is done to that outline once we are finished with it. Now the second outline that I'm going to make just after that is going to be the lower area of the lounge down here. So we're going to see all of that once this entire outline is done, as soon as I unpause the video in 2 seconds. So now the rest of the outlines have been traced, and we can actually go and continue with the next step in the process. Now just before I do carry on, I just want to show you in a few areas as I've gone and traced the outline, is I had to go and cut a few corners and make a few odd angles, because there aren't always areas or at least corners that you can snap onto. For example, we could have gone up this edge up to this point and then basically cut across to here, but we didn't have any edge to cut, or at least to snap onto here, so that we couldn't make that little cut across. So what we can do in this case is that we can select our line. I can also keep it in this area, there isn't really any problem, but if I do want to make it all go lower, then I can basically just use the Y value here, copy it, and move, or at least paste, that Y value to this line, and I can just go and select this vertex and hit delete on my keyboard. Now that just cuts out that whole thing, and I can do the same thing to these corners. Since I can actually have the slab cutting through this wall, it won't really make any difference because I'm not going to see it from the outside. Now do note that on the areas where we have the windows standing directly on the floor slab, we do need that floor slab to go all the way out to the outside and not on the inside, because you do see that edge from the outside when you're looking standing out here. So just keep that in mind as you do all of your edges. Now here as well, I had to go and trace around the stairs, and the outline that we have for the lower part basically outlines this area here. And we're going to go fill out the stairs in a step just in a moment. So just to show you now, the last one here is the garage, which is a separate floor height in itself, and as well we see the line on the inside of the wall, and then it just basically traces to include the outside, where we will see the edge of this floor slab before it becomes the driveway on the outer edge. So now that we have all of these in place, what you want to do is you want to look at your floor heights. So let's just extract, or at least isolate, the layer with the floor heights, and then let's go in and add the floor height to all of the separate lines. So this one is going to be 2.45, and we can already see that that is correct. It is at 2.45. Now this one here is 2.15, so we can basically just go and type that in. And this one over here is going to be 2 meters straight, so let's just type that in. Now you already have your original splines all at the right height, and that is basically the groundwork for all of your slab work. Make sure they're in the right area and make sure they're at the right height. Done. So the next step now is going to be to start turning them into editable polys and to start adding in the details such as the stairs and all of that. So let's go and do that now. First, let me just turn off my CAD layers, since we don't really need them that much. We can turn them on and off if we need to see the stairs and so forth. So now what we can do, if you like, you can also go and attach all of your different layers together. It doesn't really matter if you choose to do that or not. The benefit of it is that you will eventually be working with one large object, but generally try and keep separate objects for different textures. If you know that your texture will be the same on the upper and lower level of the lounge, as I'm sure we will, then we can actually go and attach those two together, even though they're at different heights. So the garage will have a different texture, so let's leave that as a separate object. So now we can go and add an editable poly modifier on top of that, and you'll see that this one at the bottom disappeared. What that means is that we don't have a closed spline at the bottom. So what we need to do is we need to actually find out where that spline has been opened or where it is not joined together. So I have a feeling that it is this one here, since generally the first vertice of a long spline will be white and the others will be yellow. So look out for that little white one, and then if you make a selection around it, here you will see that there are two vertices selected, which means that they are not welded together correctly. So let's go into that and let's try and weld that now manually. And after welding, you can see that you now have one vertice selected. Also, it has changed from a corner to bezier, so let's just go and manually select corner. And now you'll see that when you have your editable poly, it should, at least in most cases, be visible. If not, then you just want to go and basically do a quick scan and see whether you have that problem. So here I've selected two visually, but I can see that there are three. So basically there has to be a problem, which is this one. And the same thing applies here. So let's just go and weld that together. And now you will see that you have all of your floor slabs in place. So that's going to be it for this lesson. It was nice and simple. Just getting the main outlines in the right location, getting them at the right height, and then basically applying an editable poly onto them. So that already, in most cases, will be enough if you don't have any complicated stair areas, since this can already be textured. And once you have your walls showing, you will see that you already have a room in place. So in the next lesson, we will basically look at the refinement of these slabs and how we can then carry on and model the slab edges and start to work with things like the terrace and all the other more complicated bits that are lying around this ground floor slab. So that's going to be covered in the next lesson.